All right, everybody, we are live on the Automotive Intelligence Report here. My name is Sandy Cerami, your host. I got my right-hand guy with the devastating right hand, and he's a knockout live and in person as well, Mr. Ron Marvo. And we are joined today by the awesome Alicia Thomas, who is the Vice President of Acquisitions for Capital Automotive Real Estate Services, based out of McLean, Virginia. Offline, backstage, we were talking a little bit about a connection that I have to Capital Automotive, which was really neat. And I discovered as we were doing some of the background work, Alicia. But I want to welcome you to the show. I'm excited to talk to you today. We're going to talk about EVs. We're going to talk about the fact, the fiction, the myths, the realities, and your perspective, which you shared down at Autovate, Cliff Banks' awesome program in Austin, Texas, this past November. It was the first chance that I had a chance to meet you and hear you speak. I thought you articulated your position with respect to EVs and the infrastructure investments that are going to be required moving forward. But I want to welcome you to the show.
Well, thank you, Sandy, and thank you, Ron. It's so nice to see you guys here today, and hopefully one day we'll get to meet in person.
That's a fact, no doubt.
Absolutely.
No doubt. We'll hop on a bird, come down, and have dinner someplace in the DC or Northern Virginia area. There's plenty of good restaurants that we can connect at down there.
Yes, no, definitely. Well, thank you for having us. I know we're excited to be here and share what we found during our research here at CARS, and so thank you.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time. As I said, you were really generous with respect to what you shared at Cliff Banks' event back in November, and I wanted the opportunity to sit with you. Dave Boyle, who is the CEO of Tire Profiles, really pushed to get you, on and to hear your perspective, because what Dave does ties directly into what we see happening on the EV scene right now. And so let's talk a little bit about your background and a little bit about Capital Automotive Real Estate Services, so that people understand exactly what it is that you do, what Capital does, and then we'll get into more of the interview piece of it, okay?
Sure. So, I've been in the industry on and off for about 18 years now, and about 11 years of that is with Capital Automotive. I started out as a senior analyst underwriting real estate transactions for Capital Automotive, and now I'm their VP of acquisitions after a little bit of a break there in between. But Capital Automotive, we were founded in 1998 by automotive dealers. So here in Northern Virginia, the DC metro area, there were about 3 or 4 dealers here in the area that contributed their real estate to form Capital Automotive RE. And, one being Mr. Pohanka, Jack Pohanka, Vince Sheehy, and Bob Rosenthal. All 3 of them were big contributors to our company. We were publicly traded for 7 years until we went private in 2005. Our company, our primary goal here, in a nutshell, what we do is we provide sale leaseback opportunities involving dealership real estate. We've completed over $6 billion in real estate transactions over the last 24 years. Our underwriting team, our acquisitions team, we are very intimately involved with dealerships and their operations and the underwriting of the real estate.
Fantastic. And as I know from your previous talk, that's why you guys have been so keenly focused over the last few years, specifically over the last year with respect to EVs and what's happening and how it's going to impact dealers and their capital requirements moving forward. The quick fun fact that we shared backstage was that John Pohanka spoke at my graduation way back in 1997 from the General Dealership Management Program at NADA. And I said to you and Dan before we went live how impressed I was with Mr. Pohanka. He was so generous. He was so inspiring when he spoke. He really changed the trajectory of my career. He got me to think much differently, much bigger in terms of what this business really is. So I was really excited to see the connection, because I knew that there was some Pohanka connection in there, and you guys were able to clarify and clear that up for me. So I'm excited to have you here today. I want to jump right into it because, EVs are red hot in terms of the topic of conversation in our business these days. It is a very hot political topic right now. You see the politicians all, paying homage to the electric vehicle. And I think that what we'll do here today is really, we'll speak to the facts, we'll speak to some of the fiction, the myths that are out there, and speak to some of the realities that you see in the marketplace when we talk about the adoption curve, what we're going to see in the short term, what we're going to see in the long term. So I guess the first thing I'd love to ask you is when you look at these projections from politicians and the OEMs right now, they're bold. They are basically all in, pushing their chips all to the center of the table with respect to EVs. You know, what are your feelings in terms of how accurate they are in terms of their adoption rates, or how quickly you think they're going to be able to make this a reality?
Yeah, after all the research that we completed here at Cars, I'd have to say that they're a little bit ahead of their skis.
Right.
I think, with
Great
the
way to put it.
technology that's coming through this, it's huge, it's really exciting, it's sexy. But, I don't know that it's really been thought through all the way. There's still a lot of things that need to happen to make the EV impactful. Um, the biggest thing being infrastructure. We just went to the Washington, D.C. Auto Show last week, their public policy event, and all of the panelists, I mean, that was the number one concern with making sure, if EVs are successful, it has to be because we have the infrastructure there for it.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
no doubt. No doubt. It's funny, we talked offline about Elon Musk's impact. You can't talk about EVs without talking about Elon Musk.
exactly.
I don't think that we have what we have in terms of a push and a market for EVs without Tesla and Elon Musk. We talked about the fact that about 4 or 5 years ago, he basically gave access to all of the manufacturers to the battery technology that they had been working on, all patent protected data and engineering that he shared with them. Talk a little bit about, in your opinion, why he did that and how smart it was on his part.
I think it was very smart on his part to have done that. The manufacturers needed a little bit of motivation, a little bit of that kickstart,
Hmm.
to actually start, thinking about EVs and making it more prevalent in society, right? Sharing that, it helped. The manufacturers here today, GM has invested in Lordstown Motors, Ford invested in Rivian. I think it's that sharing of the knowledge that's going to actually make the technology better, right?
Yeah, no question.
So I think that it was very smart on his move, and it's challenging because he's out on Twitter every day saying something new, and
Yeah, oh yes.
if that doesn't get people motivated one way or the other, right? It gets people going. Gets people thinking, and I think the traditional OEMs don't want to get left behind.
Well, there's no question about it. I think it's twofold with respect to Elon. I think first and foremost, he knew that if he did not get um, a few, I'll call them partners in the process, that the investment in infrastructure was never going to become a reality, at least not to the point where electric vehicles could go mainstream.
Right.
And so I think that was one of his motivations for doing it. But I think the other piece of it is his ability to provoke the
Yeah.
marketplace, provoke the general public using social media and making incredibly provocative statements does a ton for all of these manufacturers,
Oh yeah.
legacy or otherwise, to gain attention and popularity with
Exactly.
respect to electric vehicles.
Exactly. Here's the other part of it is the money, right? The money factor.
Yeah.
Last last night I looked at this, and so Tesla's share price on March 16th, 2020, so that's effectively when the country sort of shut down because of COVID,
Hmm.
$90 a share.
Hmm.
Throughout 2020, we kept on getting all these announcements about Subaru going EV, the big three going EV,
Hmm.
the federal government saying, hey, we want EV as a predominant fixture in our society, and then state mandates, all of that. Well, so that's March 16th at $90 a share. Last night, I think they closed at what, $943 a share.
Yeah,
Listen,
just
he's
about.
the market cap of the company exceeded $1 trillion.
Yeah,
Um, we talked about it offline too when we prepped yesterday on our call. He could very well be the first person to bring two companies to $1 trillion valuation in history, and
exactly.
that's just incredible to me.
Exactly. So, I think there's big money. I mean, Ford just a couple of weeks ago, I know that the market has been really volatile this last week, but a couple of weeks ago, Ford hit over 100 billion in market cap. And
Hmm.
that's been a long time for Ford. I mean, I'm really excited for them.
I think back to, and we talked about 2008, 2009 off camera here. I think back to when Ford leveraged the Blue Oval, that asset, and I remember the share prices fell to the single dollar
Oh,
figure.
$2 a share.
I mean,
That was
it
very
was
Yeah, well,
expensive.
treacherous.
Sandy, I mean, even COVID when it started, I think Ford was around $3 a share
Yeah,
Yeah,
at
yeah,
that time. They've
yep,
made some increases now. We're almost at $20, but
yeah,
um,
yeah,
yeah,
incredible,
yeah,
incredible. It just goes to show you what good marketing and good news will do for share
exactly.
prices. And this is the thing that I think that the market needs to be keenly aware of, is that a lot of the hyperbolic enthusiasm that we see out there right now needs to be tempered just a bit. I'm never one to rain on somebody's parade, but I also need for viewers to understand that there are realities that we have to kind of breach in
Exactly.
order to get there, and that
Right.
there are some facts that they need to understand about electric vehicles that may or may not be something that they were aware of. So let's talk a little bit about that. When we talk about the societal or environmental impact that you see electric vehicles having on the country or on the world in general, give us your thoughts, Alicia, in terms of what you see, the pros, the cons. What are things that people aren't thinking about that they should be? Maybe what are the manufacturers missing the mark on that they're just maybe waiting to have that conversation about? What do you see out there?
For every pro, there is a con. So, for every job gain because of the new technology, you might have a couple job losses too because of the factory workers maybe not being trained in the EV or the technology that's happening. For the environmental factors, that's great. Carbon emissions will definitely go down as more people adopt EVs.
Sure.
But what do we do with the batteries at the end of life? I was just reading something the other day that you have all these recycling companies that do a great job, but because the costs of recycling those batteries are so high, folks might shortcut it and just, maybe take it to the local dump instead. Even dismantling those batteries because of the way they're welded together, it takes a lot it's very expensive to
Yeah.
actually get those batteries recycled. And to create those batteries, it does take a lot too, right?
Yeah.
You need the lithium mines and all of that up and running. So, I think that's sort of where it might even out. For every pro, there's a con.
Yeah.
I think what you might see though, as far as societal effects, unless we can get EVs to be a little bit more cost conscious, you might see a little bit more disparity. You
Yeah.
know, you're we did a review of the cars that are coming out here in 2022. The average base price of an EV is somewhere around 55 grand.
Hmm.
That's the average base price. That's before you add in all the nice little, tech things that you want in the car, all the little
Right.
seat warmers, all of that stuff. Um, you know, the average household income here in the US is $80,000.
Hmm.
Like, is someone going to really buy a car that's a starting price of $55,000
Hmm.
when your average income is 80 in your household?
Yeah,
You know,
it's funny. I think the affordability piece, you're on the money with that. A lot of what's driven the success over at Tesla has been, federal subsidies for sure.
yeah,
I know that they're earmarking additional federal subsidies for the big three specifically. I know they've also earmarked $7.5 billion in federal funds
yeah,
that they're going to dedicate towards infrastructure
right.
with respect to charging stations. Range anxiety is a real thing. Your boss Dan discussed that at Autovate.
Yeah,
A very personal experience that he had with respect to range anxiety and having to adjust a family trip to accommodate the charging requirements of an electric vehicle. Talk a little bit about what that 7.5 billion breaks down to, what it'll mean, to the general public, and then let's switch gears and talk a little bit about what dealers are going to have to do moving forward.
right. So the 7.5 billion, about 5 billion of it is going to be used to actually install charging stations throughout the US. And the other 2.5 billion, from what I've read, is going to be related to grant money so that those maybe rural markets or more disadvantaged markets actually have the opportunity to get the charging stations installed in those
Hmm.
markets as well. With the Build Back Better bill that's maybe still being tossed around, we don't know. It might resurrect. There is that $12,500 EV tax credit that could be available to the big three specifically. You have to jump through a little bit of hoops to get there. There's costs. Uh, um, Caps on vehicles. So if you're over $100,000, I believe that tax credit comes down. If you make over a certain amount of money, the tax credit comes down. If the car isn't built here in the US with the majority of its parts made here in the US in a unionized plant, you don't get the $4,000 of that tax credit. So it's great that we're thinking about all of this as far as the tax credits and all of that, but we don't know what the true advantage will be to the end result, the end consumer,
Yeah,
right?
I
For
would
those
agree.
credits.
I would
Um,
agree.
well,
They never make it simple,
no, there's
right?
always, well, if this, then this. It's the biggest flow chart you'll ever see.
Yes.
Yeah, and Alicia, especially not to cut you off, especially when you bring up the fact that the average cost of the EVs are 55,000, 50,000 ish, and your average American household is 80,000. So when you combine that with the cost for putting in the infrastructure and everything like that, do you think, in your opinion, that charging networks would even be ready to handle the amount of EVs if, let's just say, the market did get to a point where EVs were a larger majority
It's a
of
great
the market?
question.
Right?
What are your thoughts on that?
So one of the things that we found is that right now there's about 18 vehicles per charging station that's already installed here in the US. And when you go to Europe or some of those countries that have sort of early adopted EVs, they found that you need at least, I think it's 15 cars to one EV station. So we're already at a deficit of charging
Hmm.
stations. The $5 billion that's going to be used to install the charging stations throughout the US, that's from now through 2030. So we have 8 years of charging stations that need to be installed, and the technology is going to improve. I mean, look at your iPhone over the last, 10 years? How has your iPhone charger changed in the last 10 years as
The
far as
charger,
technology?
the phone, the whole thing.
Yeah. So maybe we get, let's say 100 charging stations installed today. Well, in another 3, 4 years, is that charging station going to be obsolete?
Hmm.
We have to figure that out too, as far as part of all the costs.
That's such a great point, because I know that's a major point of frustration with Apple users or Apple iPhone owners,
Yeah.
is that there is a bit of a game that's played. Apple has admitted to it, and you would hope that the automotive manufacturers would learn a lesson with
Yeah.
respect to that, especially those that are going to be responsible for the infrastructure piece. Because again, if people can't be confident that the investment that they make is going to actually be worth it over time, it's going to retard the progress EVs are looking to make in that short term, for certain.
Well, the other part of this too is just the maintenance of those charging stations. I don't know if that $7.5 billion or $5 billion is going to be going towards the maintenance of those EV charging stations. When Dan spoke about his family trip, I think the one charging plaza that he went to, two of the charging of the six charging stations
We're inoperable. Yeah.
are operable.
Yep.
So what do you do then? You know,
Yeah, and not
okay.
just that, Alicia.
I don't know why, Alicia, but Ayn Rand comes to mind the minute you mention that scenario. Her great book Atlas Shrugged, where she articulates beautifully how bureaucracy destroys progress,
Yeah.
and that's a perfect example. And we hope that's not emblematic of what we would see moving forward, because who builds and then ultimately controls and maintains these charging stations is still a question that's yet to be
Yeah.
answered. And I don't believe the government is ever the answer with
No.
respect to that. They may need to jumpstart it or prime the pump, so to speak. But if they don't have private investment there that has some stake in the success of this program, I look at it as something that's destined to be a disaster ultimately.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Recently GM, I think they're going to start sending out 10 charging stations to each of the GM dealers
Hmm.
within North America, which is great. But my question there is, okay, so it's not meant for the dealership property, which is wonderful because the dealer's already taking care of installing a couple charging stations on the properties. But how are those GM dealers going to convince the local grocer or maybe even the local gas station to install one of these charging stations? Who's going to pay for the electricity? Who's going to pay for the installation? Who's going to pay for the maintenance? We got to think of all that. The other part too is, how fast are these chargers? I
Yep.
know I'm jumping from topic to
No,
topic.
I'm
No,
so
it's
happy
okay.
you segued into that,
Yeah.
Alicia.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about level 1, 2, and 3 charging stations, what the differences are, and what the availability is.
So level 1 is your most basic charging station, and it's going to take, a day to charge your car. The level 2 is a little bit faster, and of course, level 3 is your fast charger. That's the ones with the Tesla charging stations that you see there. You know, it's still going to take at least an hour or two, even with the fast chargers, to get your car fully charged. Now,
Right.
if you're on a family road trip, you know, I don't know that I want to sit at a charging station for an hour or two waiting for my car to charge up so I can get through the next 300 miles.
Hmm.
So the charging stations, one of the guys at the Washington Auto Show, one of the panelists from Electrify America, he had made the suggestion to our government, instead of installing level 2 charging stations, let's just go right to the high speed charging stations, because again, we're always getting somewhere. When we're driving, we're getting somewhere, and we want to get to that destination. Just
Right.
plain and simple, human nature. Start installing the high speed stations so that people are, excited to have an EV, and maybe they don't have to sit there and wait for their car to charge, and
Yeah.
wish that they could just go to the local gas station and get a fill up in 5-10 minutes.
And
Well,
Alicia, it
I'll
ties
play a
back to
little
goes then.
fill in the blank with you two. You just help me finish it. Time is
Money.
time is money,
Time is
and it's
money.
the most valuable resource that people have. And I don't know how patient people are going to be. I can't stand a slow gas pump at
Oh
this
gosh,
point.
no. Oh,
You
you and me
know,
both. I will
yeah,
avoid a gas station because I know that the pumping is going to go slow.
yep,
Yep.
yeah. No, I completely agree. And these are the challenges I think that people that don't know or don't own an electric vehicle are not thinking about right now. Um, it's amazing because I think Tesla either approached or went just over 1 million units sold in this past calendar year, which is an incredible number to me. Yet when you take a look at the total car park for the United States, I think you and Dan had shared with us yesterday 280 million, approximately 280 million vehicles. Is that correct?
So by 2030, it'll be about 300 million vehicles in total cars in operation.
Hmm.
Of that, I think we're estimating probably about 20 to 30% being EVs.
Hmm.
But so that sounds like a big number. The percentage number sounds great, but it's only 25 million out of the 300 million
Correct.
cars in operation.
Right.
That's 8.3% of the
Yeah.
total car park.
And that kind of brings me to another question, and that is, and I just want you to share with the audience, like, how do you feel about the EV impact on the internal combustible engine and the future of it? You had said to me that you do or you don't see it going away completely long term.
I don't see EVs going away. I think it's like I said, it's fun, it's sexy, it's the new technology. Just going to the auto show, seeing the cars, they look really pretty,
Mhm.
handsome. Not to leave anybody out, but I don't think the EVs are going away. This is not the first iteration of EVs in the U.S. either. I mean, back in the 1800s, in the late 1800s, EVs actually were produced here in the US and actually went out of fashion in the 1930s because
Hmm.
gas prices were so low.
Yeah.
So this is not the first iteration of EVs coming, being here in the US.
Yeah.
I think now with technology, it'll probably have a longer life. I don't think ICE vehicles are going to go away, though. I mean, when
I
you have
agree.
that many units in operation, it's hard to, have EVs overcome that
Yeah.
anytime in our lifetimes.
I agree. I think that these forecasts and projections by the politicians and the manufacturers are really hyperbolic. I think it's more marketing than anything else. For anybody to sit there and tell me they're going to electrify their entire lineup within the next 10 years, I think is quite honestly, it may be a wonderful stretch objective. It may be a very um, optimistic look at things, but the reality is that I don't know that there's a public appetite for that level of electrification to start with. We certainly have talked about infrastructure as well. And I really believe that there's still going to be a lingering appetite amongst plenty of folks for that experience that only an internal combustible engine can deliver. It's nice to be myopic on
Oh
the
yeah.
EV side, but I don't think it's going to pay off long term in the
No,
end.
I mean, we have our controller here at Cars. She's part of the Mopar Club. She loves her engine, right? At the auto show, they had the GM Chevy classic car guys from the local area
Right.
here. They love their engines. And honestly, when you go to a car show, what do you want to hear? You want to hear that engine rev
Yeah,
up.
Alicia. And we talked
No
about this
question.
yesterday. The
Yeah.
No
connection
question.
between machine and man,
Yeah.
getting into your car, turning the key on and feeling the engine turn on.
Right.
Electric vehicles can only produce so much in terms of giving you that feeling and that connection to the machine.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
maybe that'll change over time.
Right.
And we talked about this yesterday. Do you ever see yourself buying an EV, Alicia, if you don't already have one?
So I have an ICE vehicle and I love it. I'm from Michigan originally, so
Okay.
it's hard for me to switch over from an ICE vehicle. I'm not gonna lie.
And
Um,
you do have
you know,
some roots into the big three, do you not?
yeah, so I worked for Ford Credit. My dad retired from Ford Credit. Growing up Southeast Michigan, 5 minutes away from world headquarters, it doesn't leave your body. It doesn't leave
Right.
your body. So, I think maybe in another 5 years, I tend to hold my cars for, 5, 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in another 3 years, I'll buy a plug-in hybrid,
Mm-hmm.
but or a plug-in EV. That's about as far as I think I can go.
Yeah.
With me, when I drive back to Michigan, I need to know that I have the charging station. I need to know that I'm not sitting there for 3 hours charging my car up. I need to have that security of knowing that I'm going to get to where I'm going to go
Well,
without any
listen,
hiccups.
range anxiety is a real thing. I've heard
It
it
really is.
discussed in a number of different forums.
Yeah.
Range anxiety is legit.
Yeah.
We also talked about the fact that not every manufacturer has done this, all-in hyperbolic jump into the EV world. We talked about Toyota Lexus specifically and their commitment to the hybrid platform that they have been dominating for years. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So, again, when we started doing all this research, all we were trying to do at first was just gather up all the headlines because every manufacturer was going, we're going to do EV by this time. We're going to do
Right.
EV by this time. And it's like, it was just information overload. And from what we saw, Toyota said, hey, in the US, we'll probably be around 15% EV by 2030. Toyota also came out and said, we're not going to get rid of our cars and just go strictly SUVs and trucks.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they have a more tempered approach to the EV situation. I think it's more of a let's wait and see. We're excited to do EVs. We do see the relevance of EVs. We do see
Mm-hmm.
the social concerns of EVs. But let's just see how this all plays out. I think
Yeah.
they've taken a more tempered approach. I think you have like the Volvos and the Daimlers of the world that maybe aren't big into unit volume that can maybe achieve those EV goals quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Volvo wants to be all EV by 2025. With a lower unit volume, they should be able to achieve that. They may be able to achieve it, right?
Yeah, I feel like they're all chasing Tesla, and they
Yeah.
feel because Tesla has gone all in that they need to follow suit. It feels like such a Me Too move from a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
these manufacturers. To me, to look at Toyota and Lexus being, as you said, more temperate, moderating their position with respect to EVs. I hear the respect that they have for the opportunity, but I also see them hedging their bet, saying, we're not going to jump off the cliff quite so quickly just because everybody else is. Reminds me of when you were a kid and your parents said to you, just because everybody else would jump off a bridge doesn't mean you would
You have
too.
to.
And it kind of
Yeah,
feels like one of those moments in this
exactly.
business right now.
Well, even Honda came out and said that they want to be 40% EV in the US by 2030.
Mm-hmm.
But then a couple months ago, they were like, we want to take a step back too and just make sure hybrids are really where it's at. And
Yeah, they're doing their best Jen Psaki walk it back for sure.
exactly. And then even Stellantis' CEO came out, Tavares said, Europe, it's all being driven by politics right now in Europe because the politicians aren't taking into account the social impacts. I think he was saying in Italy, the cost to actually convert these plants is going to be astronomical. what's going to happen to the job loss? How our prices are going to just increase incrementally. They're going to increase.
Yeah.
So how is that going to be? How is there going to be any cost saving to the consumer?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think they love the soundbite opportunities, every one of them. They're so driven by the camera in their face
Oh
and the
yeah.
microphone in front of their mouth. And I think a lot of times they are not thinking before they're speaking, to be
Well,
completely honest with you. And they
just
want to seize
remember
that
the
moment. They
whole.
want to seize the headline.
Oh yeah, and just remember the whole $90 a share, March 16th, 2020 to
Amen.
$950 a share in 2022. You
Yeah.
know, they're looking at their shareholders and wanting to show, shareholder improvement as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, watching them walk these statements back, to me is somewhat laughable. You got to really be paying attention to not
Yeah.
what they're saying, but more so where the money is going. That said, I know General Motors just announced a $7 billion investment in I believe is it a battery and
In a battery
manufacturing
plant and then
facility?
retooling an existing plant in
Yeah,
Michigan.
for the Volt, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's for the Volt, but
They're
I do.
retooling the Volt plant for the pickup truck, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so, it's big for Michigan. They're saying it's supposed to add about 4,000 jobs in Michigan. So that's wonderful. And Michigan lost a couple opportunities to Tennessee and all of that with Ford and GM previously. So I think they really stepped up to the plate to provide GM with incentives to stay in Michigan. So that's really great. I mean, anything to see Michigan succeed, I'm happy.
Yeah,
So
no doubt. Listen, I think
yeah,
the Rust Belt has taken it on the chin for multiple decades right now. There's any number of books out there that you want to read that chronicle the challenges. I have to be honest with you, in my humble opinion, I think it stems a lot from a lack of leadership over a very long period of time.
yeah,
We went through the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s with the big three, and I have a hard time outside of a couple of exceptions at Ford and Chrysler, pointing to people that really were true leaders, people that were not afraid to go out and plant their stake in the ground for something that they truly believed in and made a difference
yeah,
at that level. But let's
yeah.
talk a little bit for just a second, because you touched upon it, the environmental impact with respect to electric vehicles. Let's talk a bit about the production of electricity. This is the funny thing that people don't talk about,
Yeah.
is that to produce electricity, all the solar and wind that we've got available to us right now ain't even going to come close. I'll point to Texas not too long ago with the power grid issues, but I don't know that the grid is able to handle this type of a
No.
capacity. And I don't know that people are looking at the environmental impact of producing this electricity.
Exactly. Well, I mean, going back to Elon Musk, he said a couple of years ago that we need to double the capacity to handle any sort of, going 100% EV. And that's going to take a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of environmental impact. You mentioned, so there's been 15 states that have mandated that they don't want to sell ICE vehicles after 2035.
Mm-hmm.
Typically by executive order. I don't know that it was, a fully voted on mandate. Uh,
Listen, that's the flavor of the day in politics, is the EO.
yeah,
Let me take out
exactly,
the pen, sign the EO, and we'll do what we
exactly.
want anyway.
But you're absolutely correct. I mean, look at California right now. How many times do we hear in the summer that there's a brownout or there's a blackout in California? And we realize that they do have the most number of charging stations in California, but these brownouts were happening prior
Yeah,
to the installation of these charging stations. So,
yeah.
you know, when we have a big snowstorm, what are you going to do with your EV when you run out? Is every house going to have a generator? And then you know, how do you power that generator?
Yeah.
So,
Well,
Yeah,
I
the
tell
trickle
you,
down
and I,
effect.
I don't, I feel like I don't. People think that we're bashing
no,
EVs. I am a believer that there is certainly a huge market appetite. You can't deny it for
no,
electric vehicles. I think what we're trying to illustrate here is that there's more to the picture than meets the eye, and to what's being admitted to politically, publicly, and whatnot from the OEMs and the politicians that are out there, beating this drum on a day in and day out basis, whether it's to drive the stock price or to drive a political narrative to the party base, is immaterial to me. We want to talk about it from the realities, ultimately,
right.
because I think EVs are exciting, they're sexy. I'm going to put up a comment by Dana Sino, and she's right. You can't be left behind here. I certainly would not advocate for sitting it out, but I think you have to be measured in terms of how you're going to approach these investments. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I'm happy that the OEMs are sort of not just relying on the status quo and
Yeah,
plodding along. It's really getting them to move in different directions and improve their technology.
I
I
agree
don't think they
100%.
go away. I think there's going to be some sort of maybe a partnership. It's not going to be a 50-50 partnership between ICE and EVs, but I don't think ICE is going to go away.
Right.
I don't see how it reasonably could.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree. No doubt about it. You know, there are some exciting products that are in the marketplace right now. You can point to Tesla. You can point to the Mustang Mach-E. You can talk about the GMC Hummer that's coming out.
Yep.
There's a lot of exciting products that are in the market right now or coming very shortly. And I'm excited to see, because I have to be honest with you, I've driven a Tesla. I was blown away by the performance in the vehicle. The torque is incredible. You know, and they'll work through some of those challenges that they have in terms of the driving experience versus a combustible engine. But I think it's a matter of being measured here and realistic. Talk a little bit about what you guys are doing on the dealership front, because dealers need to invest in infrastructure at their facilities. You know, putting 1, 2, 3 charging stations at a dealership is not going to be enough, because you've got to service your own inventory of vehicles and then provide charging for drivers as well. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing right now and how you're helping dealers.
Right. So, you know, again, with the dealer clients that we do have, we've been helping them by funding the improvements that they're making at their facility to get the infrastructure installed. You know, costs can range anywhere up to $650,000 and maybe even more, depending on what type of charging stations you want to install, how many of those charging stations you want to install. You know, the way we see it, there's probably at least 4 charging stations that you need right now at a dealership.
Right.
One in front of the dealership.
Current level of adoption, you're saying.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, you want one charging station in front of the dealership to get people all jazzed up about it. Oh, what's this? You know, how does this work? You know, the manufacturers want at least one charging station in the service lanes, because, you know, again, it shows the people this is what's happening. And then you're going to want a charging station in the service delivery area. And then, of course, back in the service department itself, you need a charging station there. You know, the other thing that we found is that the service bays for those EVs, instead of a traditional service bay for a regular ICE vehicle, an EV is actually going to take up probably a service bay and a half, if not two. Because you need to have sort of a quarantine area for when you pull the battery out. Some manufacturers saying, hey, just get a forklift to help pull that battery down out of the EV. So you need that forklift to maneuver
just go pick
around.
up a forklift and, you know, just take a half a bay out of service.
Casual.
Exactly.
It's incredible.
You know, and then you got to tear up your parking lot too to get the conduit run to the transformer or whatever you have going on. So it is costly to the dealer, but I think the dealers are adjusting to it well. They're excited to sell the EVs. It's a new product. It is exciting to them, and they're willing to do whatever it takes.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think there is an appetite on the part of the dealers. They want something sexy and something fun and something different to feature as a product on their dealership lots for sure. Charles Higgins has a great question, and I have a comment, but I want to ask you first, Alicia. He says, should dealers look into more solar power options to help offset the additional power needs from the charging stations?
You know, that's definitely something that is more prevalent now. I know when I worked for a regional dealer group in between my stints here at Cars, you know, a bunch of solar power companies would come and talk to us about installing their solar panels on site. And it wasn't really very prevalent back then. We didn't see the return for the dealership at the time. But I think that there's more and more companies out there that are making it more palatable for dealers to actually install these solar panels on site to help with charging. They just have to look at it from their return on investment on that. You know.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I'll chime in and just tell you that we've actually been working with a couple of different solar providers that are out there, and there are some significant ways to benefit from financing solar projects at your dealership and incorporating charging stations into that conversation. And so I've put up on the screen here, if you want more information about that, if you're a dealer principal or a general manager and you want more information about that, just send us a quick email to info@sandycerami.com and just put in the subject line solar/EV, and we'll be happy to get some more information to you. All right, so that's solar/EV in the subject line. Send it over to info@sandycerami.com. We'll be happy to share that with you. But it's a great question by Charles Higgins, who I happen to love, by the way. He's a guy that's always paying attention. A great
Charles
dude.
is on it, man.
Yeah, no doubt.
Hey,
There's
Alicia,
another question here
good.
from my old cohort in crime. Ed and I worked together at our dealership years ago, and one of the most incredible influences on me personally and professionally. So Ed, thank you for watching, and I owe you breakfast. So I want to be clear about that. I'm gonna make good on it. But he said it's an interesting conversation, Sandy. Does anyone know how many consumers have traded in their EV for another EV? So he's asking how many people are going from EV to EV. I don't have that information, Alicia. I don't know if you do.
You know, I all I have are anecdotes of people doing that. You know, we
Okay.
have had, as we were interviewing our clients, they would tell us stories of their sales of EVs, and you know, either, you know, we had one client that they had a customer that came in and purchased an EV, and it was great for about a week, and then it wouldn't operate anymore. The vehicle wouldn't operate.
Yeah.
Finally, the dealer found out that, you know, hey, just we'll settle up with you. You know, let's get you into a different car. We'll buy your car back.
By the way, let's be fair. That happens on the ICE
It does. It
stage
does.
as well. We see that happen. So a thing
Exactly.
called the lemon law was
Well, believe
around
me,
long before EVs.
my
Yeah.
car I've had for 2 years, I had a total engine replacement last summer. So
Yeah.
it happens. It totally happens.
No question.
The customer, though, you know, after that happened, they're like, oh, let me go back to an ICE vehicle,
Mhm.
right? You know, we've had other instances where, again, the EV stopped working. They replaced the battery, and the customer was on their way. They were still happy because they were very big into the technology, and they wanted to support this up and coming, you know, that up and coming thing.
Yeah, no question. No question. Ron, you had a story with respect to some clients that you had at Audi years ago. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah,
Because it's
absolutely.
relevant to the question.
And Alicia, it's so funny because I'm sure that you have those conversations with some of these dealer clients that are talking about whether or not the EVs fit their lifestyle. They want to adopt the new technology, but it might not fit their lifestyle. And the story that I have is I had sold one of the first e-trons out of Audi in the Northeast region, and the gentleman was super excited. You know, it's something that he'd wanted to do for a long time. And, you know, my question moving forward from that point was to any of my clients, does it fit your lifestyle, right? So he bought the e-tron, and about a month into ownership, I get a call from him. Ron, you know, I bought this thing. I was super excited, but I got to tell you, and his words, unfortunately, at the time were, this is an overpriced golf cart. And I'm not indicting Audi when I say that at all, because they make an excellent product, and I do love the brand. But for him, it just didn't fit his lifestyle because he was traveling on the highway sometimes 150 miles in a day. And he was trying to find charging stations that were either inoperable, not, you know, were taken by another EV, or they just weren't available along his route. And Charles Higgins had mentioned earlier about you can actually send your route to the vehicle in a lot of these EVs. So you do have a charging station that's along your route.
Yeah.
But it just didn't fit his lifestyle. And then on the contrast, I had another gentleman who bought an e-tron, and he lived 10 miles away from his carpentry warehouse. And he had a 240 volt charger at his warehouse and at his home. So that's a level 2 charger. And you're charging the car in about 8 hours. And if you're only 10 miles away, your car's never out of battery. You're driving city miles, and you have the option of using regenerative braking. So for somebody like him, perfect, you know,
Yep.
and he can actually adopt that technology and not have a concern. I kind of wanted to segue that into the dealership again. where you talked about the dealers adopting the charging stations, you had mentioned earlier about will they be able to adopt charging stations that are already level 3 so they don't have to do it in the future? So I think that that's a big point. And then what are your thoughts on technicians dealing with this technology in the dealership itself?
Yeah.
Do you feel that they are at risk, or they're getting the proper training on how to handle these electrified vehicles?
So I think as far as the dealer body is concerned, training is so imperative for them. The technicians, they go through rigorous courses of training. The dealers are spending $30,000 to $40,000 on the training, the equipment, their special equipment, special gear that they have to wear. It is important. And here's the thing: is that again, this can happen with an ICE vehicle too, but with an EV, you have to worry about that electrical charge that's coming off the EV and off of the
Mhm.
battery, right? Um, when you have the electrical charge, and if you're not being safe about it, you run the risk of burning down your service department, right?
Yeah,
So you have to, dealers are very, very conscious of that. So I think from the folks that we've talked to, they're training like 1 to 2 techs within their dealerships, depending on, the volume that they're expecting to sell
yeah,
for EVs. And so that they have those 1 to 2 techs that are specialized, but those techs, because we don't have the volume of EVs out there right now, they're not always working on EVs. So they're still working
right,
on your traditional ICE vehicles, right?
for sure.
So, but I think that the training and safety is very, very important to the dealers and to the
Agreed.
OEM.
Agreed.
And
It's funny
honestly,
as I listen to the conversation, I keep thinking of the fact that there's so many different lifestyles out there. It's why we've got so many different vehicles. You see manufacturers that went completely SUV and truck and have completely abandoned passenger vehicles. I don't know that that's always going to be the case. I think that there's certainly opportunity for those that did not abandon passenger vehicles, because there's still some of us out there that prefer that type of ride. But I think it's going to be the whole different strokes for different folks deal. To
exactly,
jam everything, to jam one way down everybody's throat, I think is going to be something that we see change. It's not going to be where everybody is looking for the electric vehicle. I think there's going to be a healthy appetite for it. We've got to set the infrastructure up the right way.
yeah,
And we have to see the investment. The money will follow if the appetite is significant enough. All right. I
exactly,
think, force feeding it and then hoping it's going to be the right decision, I think, is not the way to approach it. Now, that's why we've got something we call free markets. And in a free
it's
market
Exactly.
economy,
capitalism at its best,
the
right? Give
market
us
makes
some
the
choice.
decision, not the politician or the
Yeah,
OEM. I almost feel like when you go way back in the history of our business, the manufacturers really dictated what product was brought to the marketplace, not
right,
the consumer. And
right,
so I
Correct.
don't want to lose sight of that fact, in our business. The consumer is the one that's going to make the determination
exactly.
ultimately.
And in the end, you have to make the consumer feel like they're getting from point A to point B quickly, safely, and cost effectively.
Amen. Exactly. And that's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Charles Higgins has 2 more questions. I want to make sure we get to him. He says, what about e-transit for parcel industry like Amazon, FedEx, UPS, et cetera? And can you speak to that at all, Alicia, from what you've seen out there? I've seen significant investment
Right.
in that for sure.
So Amazon, I mean, Rivian stock took a hit when Amazon came out and said, "Hey, we're gonna do a bunch of EVs with Stellantis."
Right.
So I think that it might be better. They might have the ability to, when they take the cars back to the warehouses, they have the wireless charging and all of that. I've seen some couple articles like through Fleet reading that warehouses should really move towards the wireless charging for these EV vehicles. You know, I don't know that the e-transit EV is going to work in like maybe the DC metro area because of traffic issues.
Right.
You know, I think it just depends on the region. And I think that these companies like Amazon and FedEx and UPS are just going to have to test it out. It's admirable that they are willing to change their fleet. Even the government is trying to change their fleet over, right, to all EV. So I think it's admirable. Hopefully it does work out. But we'll see.
Alicia,
I don't know
do
that I
you?
have a lot of. Go
Go ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Do you
I
think?
don't know that I have a lot of faith in sort of the full adoption of this. Again, it's just,
You and I exchanged a message last night on LinkedIn, Alicia, regarding that.
Yeah.
I'm
Yes,
here from the
exactly.
government. I'm here to help. Right.
Alicia,
Yeah.
do you think that some of these technology companies joined the party and actually building an electric vehicle? Because there's people that talk about that, like Apple making a car or Amazon actually making an electric vehicle. And do you think that happens, and does it pose any threat to our actual OEMs?
I don't think it will pose a threat to the OEMs. Again, it's sort of like the Elon Musk. Let's poke them a little bit and see if we can wake them up. I think that there's going to be partnerships with the OEMs. I don't know that, because the OEMs know how to build a car, right? Apple knows technology. I don't know that you have to have that balance between the two, right? I don't know that you're going to have one overtake the other.
You raise a great point, Alicia, with respect to the knowledge on how to build a vehicle. And I look at it a little bit differently. The lens that I'm looking at it through is that there's a simplification of the manufacturing process as it relates to the assembly of the actual vehicle itself. Now, with respect to battery manufacturing and the chip technology is a little bit different animal, but you really wring out a lot of the complexity in the builds on electric vehicles versus traditional internal combustible engine vehicles. And I think that's one of the reasons why Tesla was able to do what they've done throughout the history of their company. I think it speaks to Ron's point about whether it's Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, whoever happens to be out there, Samsung. They certainly tried it on the ICE side, 25 years ago. But I think when you wring out the complexity of the manufacturing process and they're able to simplify the battery technology as well, the last piece of the puzzle is the infrastructure. And it almost feels like they want to drive it that way. Specifically, they want to actually force that so they can simplify things on the manufacturing side.
Yeah. I think infrastructure is going to be sort of the key to everything. Getting consumer confidence, making it more prevalent in the U.S.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd agree. Charles Higgins chimes in that he thinks that technicians are going to be like electrical engineers. They already are, buddy. You're absolutely right. You think about the ability to read wiring diagrams and whatnot. We've had that, as part of our business for the last 15, 20 years as computers have played a bigger and bigger role. And then he says, we look at acquiring technicians, but how are we looking forward to what kind of technicians we will need in the future? Are we looking to the electrical and engineering industries for our future technicians? It's funny because Ron's going to be sitting on a panel, I think next week, right, Ron? With Lincoln Tech.
February 17th, I'll be at Lincoln Tech.
Talking specifically about this topic as it relates to the service and repair end of electric vehicles with Lincoln Tech and the awesome Nella Santangelo. And so I'm sure you'll come back with some great information there. But you're right, Charles. We've got to look at how we source labor with respect to technicians moving forward much, much differently. It'll be a different skill set. So
it definitely will. And I think dealers need to look at that too from a cost perspective. It's going to eat into their service absorption maybe.
Yep.
Because they're going to have to pay these guys more because they're more technically savvy.
Yeah, no question.
So
my man Michael Poro chiming in. He says, OEM or Apple, they still need us, the retailer. We know how to retail. And Michael, you ain't wrong, brother.
Exactly. So I think there's been a lot of question about, hey, Tesla, Rivian, Lucid, they're going direct to the consumer. What about the franchise dealer? And honestly, I don't think the franchise dealer is going to be going anywhere anytime soon.
The model will look different, though, right?
I
think the model will look different, right?
Yes.
So the role that they play, I think, will look different. And my man Mark Geron, the incomparable Mark Geron, who's on a motorcycle somewhere or racing a car somewhere, having fun, living the life because he's had such an incredible career. He and I have talked about this, and he has said, he sees the distribution model being disrupted and adjusted. The dealers won't go away, but how the dealer serves the general public and their relationship with the manufacturers will be adjusted over time.
Right. No, definitely. You figure with dealerships, they're a mainstay in the community, right?
Yep.
And I think from my perspective, I can only talk from my perspective here, but you want to know that you have a relationship with someone at that dealership. You don't want to go and, you can go to, and I'm not knocking Tesla or Rivian or Lucid because they have people working in those showrooms, if you want to call them showrooms.
Sure.
but you want that relationship. You see that guy at Tesla and okay, it's in, out, done. I'll go order my car online or, order it in the showroom. I'm done here. But you want to know that, hey, if I'm having a problem with my car, I can call Jack who helped me buy that car, right? I want to know that that dealer is involved in my community and helping the community.
Yeah.
They want someone that's there, right? I don't think the dealer body is not going to go away.
I totally agree. I think there's always going to be a role. They all wanted to, I'm going to say, Amazonify their business, right? Where they can, bring everything in-house under one rooftop. The truth of the matter is, A, they don't have anywhere near the capital that
Right.
Amazon has available to them. They don't have near the efficiency or scale in their business model that Amazon provides. And so I think that that's a pipe dream. Michael Porro is spot on. There's always going to be a need for the dealer network to service the clients effectively if we want to do it the right way.
Oh yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think if I do go EV, I'm going to want to buy it from a traditional OEM too, because I don't know
Okay.
the Teslas and the Lucids and the Rivians, right? And it's great that they're in the malls and they're accessible to us, but I at least know that the traditional OEMs, again, know how to build a car.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
no,
they have
no,
heritage,
plus
Alicia,
the
right?
relationships that you have,
Yeah.
right? You have these legacy relationships
Exactly.
on the grassroots level that people are not necessarily going to walk away from, especially if the dealer has done their level best in exceeding the expectations of those clients.
Exactly.
Usually, and Scott Joseph, my man, the CEO at J&L Marketing, talks about where you see defection, and it's more brand related than it is dealer related, to be honest with
Right.
you. When you take a look at the numbers. But
Yeah.
Alicia, I get, first of all, I want to thank you because it's been an incredible, almost coming up on an hour here, an incredible hour, incredibly insightful, and I appreciate your generosity. If people want more information from you in terms of how you can help service their needs at a dealership level, how can they reach out to you?
Sure. You can email me at athomas@capitalautomotive.com. Our
Okay.
website is capitalautomotive.com.
Okay.
And we have a full-on acquisitions team, and we have a great real estate underwriting department too, portfolio management department. So, right now we have about 75 clients under our belts, and hopefully they're all happy with us, and we enjoy working with them. So you won't find anybody better in the business when it comes to
Well,
real estate.
yeah, nobody's been doing it longer than you guys. You were the first.
That's for sure.
And I remember, the emanation of Capital Automotive RE, way back when. So,
Yep.
be sure to reach out to Alicia if you do have any questions. Ron, I don't know if you got any final questions for Alicia.
I would just ask Alicia, first of all, thank you for your time. It's been a great conversation. Just as a sidebar, I'm a Ford guy also as well. I have a GT500. I got my Shelby above my shoulder over here. But anyway, my final question would be this. What do you think, who do you think the big winners are maybe in the next 3 to 5 years? And what do you think really happens as a final thought in the next 10 to 15 as it relates to EVs?
I think I thought about this question last night when we were going through everything. And honestly, I think it's going to be those OEMs or car makers that can bring a cost efficient EV so that it's more affordable to people. Plain and simple, it has to be affordable to the regular consumer.
Yeah.
So, is it going to be Ford? Is it going to be Toyota? Nissan with their Ambition 2030
sure.
plan. Who knows? Maybe Nissan will make a comeback with that. I think it's just really who can deliver a cost-efficient, safe vehicle that makes people feel comfortable driving.
1,000%.
Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah.
agree.
My father
question
even
about
added
it.
that in the comments.
Yeah.
He was like, just make it more affordable for people. That's what he said. It's true.
Right.
It's true.
Yeah. Well, listen, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us here on the Automotive Intelligence Report. You did not disappoint. You delivered the
Thank you
goods.
guys.
I knew you would. As I said, you really you got my attention. You kept it throughout your presentation down at Autovate in Austin back in November, and Dave Boyles as well. And so, as I said to you, we want to make sure that we circle back with you and Dan in the future. We'd love to have you back on in the next couple of months as we see this thing play out. But once again, everybody, thanks so much for joining us here on Sandy Cerami's Automotive Intelligent Report. For now, we're going to step up to stand out. A special thanks to my man, Mr. Ron Marvo, the guy with the devastating right hand. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks,
Thank you,
Enjoy,
guys.
everyone. Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you.